Hare Krishna. We like to welcome everyone for the next part of our Sangamela. Today is day number 3. We are very happy today to have a special guest, His Grace Sutapa Prabhu. I would like just before we start to remind everyone where we actually stand in our seminar. Yesterday evening, His Holiness Sachinandana Swami was giving a very beautiful lecture where he spoke about Vrinda Devi as one of the gatekeeper or one of the person who is able to give us those aspiration in our heart. And Maharaj was also explaining how when we develop those divine aspirations in our heart, then immediately Radha and Krishna becomes very attracted to those devotees. And so now we will go forward with His Grace Sutapa Prabhu and hear more on this topic of developing divine aspirations. For those of you who will need a translation in Croatian, German, or Russian, we will send you the link so that you can join us there. And for every questions that might come up during the presentation, please send them to me on the chat and we will address them at the end to Sutapa Prabhu. And finally, Sutapa Prabhu, I guess he's already well known to many of the devotees. In case not, he's, I would say, a brilliant star into Srila Prabhupada's movement. He has written many wonderful books. Few wonderful books. Very inspiring. And Sutapa Prabhu has a good ability to structure his presentation in a very relevant way, and he's able to translate Krishna consciousness into a very practical way. So we are very, very happy that he has joined us this morning, and now I will give him the words. Hare Krishna.
Thank you, Guru Hari Prabhu, for your kind introduction and welcome. And thank you very much to His Holiness Sachinandan Maharaj for encouraging me and giving me the opportunity to share something with all the Vaishnavas here. There are many exalted Vaishnavas in the assembly, and I pray for your blessings and permission to share something. Today we will try to develop this beautiful theme that we have for the Sangamela this year, developing divine aspirations. And this morning we will turn to the Srimad Bhagavatam as we turn to every single morning. Today is actually the disappearance of Devananda Pandit, a great associate of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, who was a famous reciter of Srimad Bhagavatam. But on that one occasion where he was reciting the Bhagavatam very, very sweetly in the assembly, Srivas Pandit came, and as Srivas Pandit heard the beautiful narrations of the Bhagavat, he fainted in ecstasy. And as the other students removed Srivas Pandit from the assembly, thinking him to be causing a disturbance, Devananda Pandit did not do anything to stop them. And Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu considered this to be an offense, because he explained to Devananda Pandit later on that the book Bhagavat can only be known through the person Bhagavat, because the person Bhagavat, or the Vyakti Bhagavat, is the one who embodies the mood, the ecstasy, the love, the aspirations that the Bhagavatam speaks about. And therefore, if you're not able to detect and respect and honor and take the mercy from the person Bhagavat, then you will never be able to understand what the Bhagavat is trying to teach you, to imbibe in your own life. And so in this way, later on, Devananda Pandit appreciated and served the great devotee Vakreshvara Pandit in his ecstasy. And when he appreciated this Bhagavat, the beautiful dancing of Vakreshvara Pandit, then he received the mercy and was reinstated in the inner circle of the Lord's entourage. So we will turn to the Bhagavatam today. And the Bhagavatam is really the book of love. It's the book which describes what is love. It's the book which exhibits in so many beautiful pastimes what is love. And it's the book which teaches us how to develop love through the wonderful lives of the devotees within the Bhagavatam. And so we will turn to the Bhagavatam and in that way try to understand the foundation of how to develop devotional aspirations, because devotional aspirations can only awaken within the heart of someone who has developed prema or love. And therefore we turn to the Bhagavatam to remind ourselves how to develop that prema. So before we begin, we'll offer some respects to our teachers and the Supreme Lord, and then we'll proceed. Om Ajnanatimidandhasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshur Unmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manobhishtam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamayam Dadati Swapadantikam Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Yuta Padakamalan Shri Gurun Vaishnavamscha Shri Rupam Sagrajatam Sahagana Raghunathan Vitam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadutam Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padan Sahagana Lalita Shri Vishakhanvitamscha He Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dinabandhu Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostute Tapta Kanchana Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Vrishabhanu Sute Devi Pranamami Hari Priya Vancha Kalpatarubhyascha Kripa Sindhubhya Evacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shri Vasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. Grantaraj Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai. Okay, so with your permission, I'll share a small PowerPoint here, which will help to kind of guide us through our discussions today. And as mentioned, we will begin by turning to the Bhagavatam. The Bhagavatam is ultimately a love story. Srimad Bhagavatam Pramanamamalam Prema Pumartho Mohan. One of the main things that Mahaprabhu came to teach the world is that prema is the goal of life. It's the Pumartho Mohan. It's the Pancha Purushartha, is the ultimate goal beyond Dharma, Artha, Kama, and Moksha. We seek prema. Kaviraj Goswami says, Prema dhana vina vyartha daridra jivan dasakori vetan more deha prema dhan. That prema dhana vina vyartha, if I am devoid of prema, if I am devoid of the wealth of prema in my heart, daridra jivan, then I must be considered a very impoverished soul. And therefore he turns to the Lord and says, Dasakori, make me your servant. Vetana more, and I only seek one salary, deha prema dhan, for my service, please award me with some prema. And so we turn to the Bhagavatam, which really highlights that prema is the goal of life. If you see here on the screen, what the Bhagavatam does very, very expertly through the pastimes is help us to realize that nothing else is of value, nothing else is of significance, nothing else is more exalted than love. And what the Bhagavatam does in a very ingenious way, if we look closely, it inverts all of our conceptions of who may be exalted, who may be elevated. And it shows that in our normal conventional understanding of what the hierarchy of elevation may be, if someone enters and has prema, that is the ultimate factor which trumps everything else. One example is ashram consideration. By ashram consideration and social convention and social hierarchy, we understand the sannyasis or the renunciates to be the leaders of varnashram and higher than the grihastas in that sense, the natural gurus. But then the Bhagavatam presents a story in which a grihasta, Ambarish Maharaj, a king, is shown to be more exalted than a renunciate, Durvasa Muni, such that the Lord says, such devotees like Ambarish, Sadhavo Hridayam Mayam, Sadhunam Hridayam Tvaham. They are always in my heart, and I am always in their heart. The Bhagavatam inverts our understanding. In a conventional understanding, it seems logical to say demigods are more exalted than demons. That seems to be the natural hierarchy of things. But then in the 6th canto of the Bhagavatam, we find the story in which Vritrasura and Indra come face to face, and Indra, the most exalted of demigods, looks at Vritrasura, hears his speech, and realizes he is more exalted than me. And in this way, Vritrasura's glories are established in the Bhagavatam as a great devotee. Demons can be more exalted than devotees or demigods if they have devotion. In our social convention and hierarchy, men are generally considered again to be natural guru figures. But then we have stories in the Bhagavatam where the ladies are seen to be more exalted. The brahmanas, the yagyic brahmanas, who are doing mantra, tantra, visharada, they know all the mantras, all the tantra, they know all the rituals, but when the gopas come, they ignore them. Whereas the wives have grasped the essence of everything. They give everything they have to Krishna and the gopas. In fact, they give their very selves to Krishna, and they offer themselves in that way. More exalted. By Varna consideration, Brahmanas are considered natural gurus, naturally higher. But then we see at Naimisharanya that all the sages who are of such exalted birth are hearing from Sutta Goswami, who from social convention is considered of a lower birth. But because he has love, because he has realization, therefore they're ready to hear. By age, the older, the elders are considered exalted, worshipable. But then we find the stories of Dhruva, Prahlad, and others who are not advanced in age, but because they're advanced in devotion, they become authorities in devotion, authorities on the Bhagavatam, authorities in spiritual life. And then we see by social position, kings are considered higher than mere servants or sudras. But when Jadabharat is carrying the palanquin of Rahugana, finally Rahugana comes to the point of understanding that his palanquin carrier is much more exalted than him. And therefore Jadabharat then begins to instruct Rahugana on how to control his own mind. And in this way, Rahugana becomes the student, the disciple, the humble servant of Jada Bharat, who instructs him because he has love. And so this is very, very beautiful. The Bhagavatam is helping us to understand that it's really love which is what counts, and love which is our ultimate aspiration, and love which is the goal of spiritual practice. Now, as we see, how does the Bhagavatam begin to enunciate and teach us about this love is very, very beautiful. There are 12 cantos within the Bhagavatam, and there are said to be 10 topics within the Bhagavatam. And our acharyas mentioned that these topics are not sequential, such that one topic is given and then another topic and then another topic and then another topic. It is not that one canto is talking about one topic, but rather that we find within all cantos, elements of all topics are given. Yet the commentators do also say that within each canto, we can find an emphasis, a predominance of a certain topic being discussed. And for our purposes today, before I go into the verse that we will speak today, and we will discuss about today, I just thought to give some context by first looking at the canto in which this verse appears, and then looking at the chapters in which this verse appears, and then we'll actually go to the verse, which will help us to better appreciate what we're actually hearing today. So in the 10th chapter of the second canto, the 10 topics of the Bhagavatam are given. Atra sarga visargascha stanam poshanam utaya manvanteresha nukatha nirodha muktir ashraya. So these are the 10 topics of the Bhagavatam, and many of the commentators, including perhaps one of the most famed commentators of the Bhagavatam, Sridhar Swami, they agree and they kind of present that this is the emphasis of topics, the 10 topics, and how they relate to the various cantos of the Bhagavatam, although we find elements of each topic in each canto. Now, for our purposes today, the first 2 cantos are not yet listed here in this table that I'm showing you. And how do the first 2 cantos fit in terms of what they describe and what they contribute to the narrative of the Bhagavatam? Commentators say that the first canto of the Bhagavatam is very much dealing with adhikar or qualification. Who is actually qualified to hear the Bhagavatam? Before we even begin these beautiful narrations, what should be the qualifications of a hearer? And what should be the qualifications of a speaker? And in pursuance of doing this, what we hear about is the exchanges between firstly Sutta Goswami and the sages of Naimisharanya. Then we hear the exchange between Narada Muni and Vyasadeva. And then we hear the exchange between Sukadeva Goswami and Parikshit. And through these exchanges of guru and disciple, we begin to understand what is the qualification that one must embody in order to really be able to grasp the Bhagavatam. And therefore, we can see that the first canto is almost laying the foundation for the Bhagavatam to begin. Sometimes it's mentioned that the first canto of the Bhagavatam is simply a preface to the narrations, because as we know, the first canto ends with the beginning of the conversation between Sukadeva and Parikshit, in which Parikshit asks his very famous question, which is, what is the duty of all men at all times, and what is the duty specifically of someone who is about to die? Sarvatmana mriyamaneshcha krityam, he says. Sarvatmana, what's the duty of everyone, all atmas? Mriyamanes, and what is the duty of someone who is about to die? This is the question that Parikshit asks. And the second canto, which is the canto that we will look at today, the verse appears in the second canto. According to the commentators, the second canto deals with sadhana. And sadhana means the means of attainment. How will we attain? What is the process by which we can attain the sadhya, the perfection that we desire? And therefore, we see that in the second canto, the way the canto begins is that in the first 3 chapters, Sukadev is responding to Parikshit's inquiry. Parikshit's inquiry, remember, is what is the duty of all people at all times, and specifically what's the duty of someone about to die. And Sukadev Goswami is very interesting. He's so enthused by Parikshit's question. He says, Varya ne sate prashna, what a beautiful question you have asked. Krito loka hitam nripa. This question has the ability to give great benefit to the whole world. So he's so enthused by Parikshit's question that what he then does is he begins to reel off a series of verses and begins to speak of a series of things without even doing a Mangalacharan. Because it's said that when we begin a spiritual discourse, the first thing we should do is do a Mangalacharan. But we see that Sukadev Goswami's Mangalacharan doesn't appear until the 4th chapter of the second canto. And the explanation is given that he is so enthused by Parikshit's question, and he feels so much urgency to answer that he even forgets to do a Mangalacharan, and instead he goes immediately into a narration. And in these first 3 chapters of the second canto, what he does is he basically outlines many, many different processes of connecting, many different processes of sadhana. He talks about connecting via the universal form. He talks about connecting via the Lord in the heart. He talks about connecting via the worship of powerful controllers within the universe. But then ultimately, what Sukadev Goswami does is he establishes bhakti, or devotional service, as the supreme sadhana, the supreme means of attainment, the supreme process for awakening pure devotion within the heart of the living entity. And so the 3rd chapter of the second canto is a very beautiful chapter. It's entitled Pure Devotional Service, the Change of Heart. And I thought to pick a verse from this chapter because devotional aspirations, divine aspirations can only sprout within the heart of a living entity, a heart which has been changed by devotion. We have to break the steel-framed heart. That is described also in that chapter of the Bhagavatam. Tadasmasadam hridayam patedam. We have to break that steel-framed heart, because in that steel-framed heart, navikriyeta tayada vikaro. In that steel-framed heart, there is no movement, there is no transformation, there is no emotion which is arising. Netre jalam gatra ruheshu harsha. In that steel-framed heart, there can be no tears that fall. There can be no hairs of the hairs standing on end. There can be no shivering of the body. Harinam adhyaya. Even when the holy name is being recited, there's no transformation. So we seek this change of heart. And this change of heart is perhaps the hardest thing. In spiritual life, we change our name, which is quite easy, which people look forward to. We change our association, which is maybe a little more difficult, but it comes quite naturally also because devotees are very nice. We change our lifestyle, which requires a little bit more effort. We change our habits, which sometimes it takes some years to do that. We change our name, our association, our lifestyle, our habits. But sometimes we look in our spiritual life and we think, I changed so many things, but did I change my heart? Therefore, in the Paribhasa Sutra of the Chaitanya Charitamrita, it said, Spuratu va Sachinandana, Sadaridaya Kandare, Spuratu va Sachinandana. You may have allowed the Lord to enter different aspects of your life, but have you situated that beautiful Supreme Lord, Hridaya Kandare Spuratu, has that Supreme Lord appeared in the innermost chambers of your heart? He's come to give you prema, but have you allowed him into the innermost chambers of your heart? We can change so many things in spiritual life, but changing the heart, allowing the Lord to descend and land within the heart, that is difficult. And just as a side point, Jiva Goswami, in commentary to that verse, the fourth verse of the Adi Lila chapter 1, which is considered the Paribhasa Sutra of Chaitanya Charitamrita, he says that Chaitanya Mahaprabhu has come to give the mercy. So why don't we get the mercy? Why isn't our heart conquered by Chaitanya Mahaprabhu? And he says, because we are kapat, because we are duplicitous. And that duplicitousness manifests in different ways. And he says there is dhana kapat, one who is holding back material resources and abilities. There is bala kapat, one who is holding back their energy and their effort and their endeavor. And then there is prema kapat, one who is holding back their heart, their love, their full, wholehearted dedication and giving of themselves to the process. And so he analyzes why the heart has not changed and been infused with the mercy of Mahaprabhu, saying because we are duplicitous. So today we are reading from the third chapter of the second canto. Remember, the second canto is to do with sadhana. In the first three chapters, Sukadeva establishes pure devotion as the ultimate sadhana. And in this chapter, specifically chapter 3, he is talking about the beautiful change of heart that happens. And now you will see a verse from the Bhagavatam that many of you will be familiar with. It's a verse that Srila Prabhupada quoted many, many times. And it's a verse which is profound in many ways. And so I'll try to share this verse because I feel this change of heart is the very foundation of developing divine aspirations. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Akama Sarva Karma va Moksha Kama Udaradi Tivrena Bhakti Yogena Yajaita Purusham Param. So in this beautiful verse, Sukadeva Goswami says, a person who has broader intelligence, Udaradi means broader intelligence. someone who has broader intelligence, whether he be full of all material desire, without any material desire, or desiring liberation, must by all means worship the supreme whole, the personality of Godhead. So here you can see in this beautiful verse, Sukadeva Goswami is outlining three broad categories of individuals. Oops. First, he is talking about the akama, someone who is desireless. Then he is talking secondly about Sarva Karma, one who has many material desires, or we can say all material desires under the sun. And then he is talking about someone who is moksha karma. And he is saying that for all of these three categories of people who perhaps cover the complete spectrum of living entities in terms of material or desire that they can embody, for all of them across the board, only one thing is recommended: bhakti yoga to the Purusham Param, devotional service to the Supreme Lord, but not just any type of devotional service, specifically Tivrena or Tivra Bhakti, intense devotional service, is what is recommended for all of these individuals. So Srila Prabhupada writes a very beautiful purport to this, and because it's a long purport, I will only focus on the last paragraph of the purport. And so here I will read out the final paragraph of this purport, on which Srila Prabhupada beautifully comments on this verse. So Srila Prabhupada says, Udaradi means one who has broader outlook. People with desires for material enjoyment worship small demigods, and such intelligence is condemned in the Bhagavad Gita 7:20 as Rita Jnana, the intelligence of one who has lost his senses. One cannot obtain any result from demigods without getting sanction from the Supreme Lord. Therefore, a person with broader outlook can see that the ultimate authority is the Lord, even for material benefits. Under the circumstances, one with a broader outlook, even with the desire for material enjoyment or for liberation, should take to the worship of the Lord directly. And everyone, whether an akama or sakama or moksha karma, should worship the Lord with great expedience. This implies that bhakti yoga may be perfectly administered without any mixture of karma and jnana. As the unmixed sun rays are very forceful and are therefore called tivra, similarly, unmixed bhakti yoga of hearing, chanting, etc. may be performed by one and all, regardless of inner motive. So this is a very, very beautiful purport. And Srila Prabhupada is explaining that yes, this is what is prescribed for all living entities to engage in Tivrena Bhakti Yogena. As mentioned in this verse, three broad varieties of individuals are given. The first variety of individual that's talked about is the Sarva Karma, the individual who may have all material or at least many material desires. And their vision of the world is that they're very much looking at the world. They're looking at the world with the goal to enjoy. And their mood, their kind of heart disposition is one of attachment towards the objects of the senses. This is known as the path of karma, and ultimately we know this leads to frustration. So, this is very interesting. Like, say, for example, in the 6th canto of the Bhagavatam, Bali Maharaj requests or offers Vamandev any charity, and then Vamandev asks for 3 steps of land. After all, how much does a Brahmana need? More than 3 steps of land? It's enough to lie down. That's all you need. And then Bali Maharaj is aghast. He's baffled. Why did you ask for so less? And then Vamandev quotes this beautiful verse. Yavanto vishaya preshthas trilokyam ajitendriyam. If one is ajitendriyam, if one's senses are uncontrolled, yavanto vishaya preshthas trilokyam, even if he is given everything in the 3 worlds, nasuknuvanti te sarve pratipurayitum nripa, he will not be satisfied. If one has uncontrolled senses, if one has an enjoying mentality, no matter what they obtain, their desires are never satisfied. Krishna says in the Bhagavad Gita, Duspurena nalena cha, the karma burns like fire. One poet, he says, for the materialist, for the karmi, if all of the clouds in creation were transformed into reams of paper, and if all the oceans in creation were transformed into bottles of ink, then even that ink and that paper would not be sufficient to write down all of the desires that could enter within the heart of someone who is materially attached. And so here Krishna outlines that this is one category of personality. And then he says there is another category of personality who is moksha karma. They desire moksha, and their vision is that they're trying to look away from the world. Their goal is not to enjoy the world, their goal is to escape the world, and their mood is a mood of detachment, a mood of disconnection, a mood of renunciation. And this is known as the path of Gyan, and this may bring some peace. And then Krishna says, or Sukadeva Goswami says, there is the akama. And the akama, their vision is that they're looking beyond the world. In other words, they function within this world, but their vision is very much focused on the spiritual reality. And their mood is one that this world is a bridge, and therefore I simply utilize whatever I can utilize in this world in order to make my way to the spiritual world. And this is known as the path of bhakti, and this is what ultimately brings happiness. Akama means to have no material desire, to be truly desireless. Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur, in commentary, he gives also another beautiful explanation of akama. He says, yes, akama may mean no material desire, but also he says, we read in the Bhagavad Gita, Aksharanam akarosmi. Krishna says, of all syllables, I am, or of all letters, I am the letter A. And so he says, akama means A, which stands for Krishna, Kama. So literally, Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur says, akama means Krishna desires only for Krishna. And therefore, to become desireless and to only desire for Krishna, they go hand in hand. And so he gives this very beautiful explanation of what akama means. It means to have no material desire, and you can only have no material desire when akama, all your desires are for Krishna, who is A, the letter A amongst all letters, as described in the 10th chapter of the Gita. And so this is the broad spectrum of living entities. And so the change of heart really means to somehow come to this point. These are three broad categories. And of course, we could say that there are many other categories in between these categories. Like you have the karmi in the first row of this table. But below the karmi, you can have the ugra karmi. The ugra karmi's desire is to harm others. You can have a vikarmi. A vikarmi's goal is to exploit the world. A karmi's goal here, as we can see in the table, is to enjoy the world. A jnani's goal is to escape the world. We can say a yogi's goal is to control the world. But a bhakta's goal is to serve, to love. And another interesting, I'm not going to speak much more about this table, but a lot happens from this table, and we can actually see that these are not only three categories of different types of transcendentalists, but we can even see within the devotional progression that we go through in spiritual life, there is a stage where as devotees, we're still very much looking at the world. As devotees, we go through a stage where we're very much trying to go away from the world. And there's a mature stage within the devotional life where we're looking beyond the world and we're fixed on Krishna. For example, in the beginning of one's spiritual life, there may be a lot of karma mishra, a lot of material desires. There's a stage where in our spiritual development where we're kind of very materially frustrated. We can't connect with anything or anyone of the world anymore. And we almost feel like we don't belong in this world, and we can't function within this system anymore. We're not normal. We can't be normal anymore. And then we see there's a mature stage where a devotee learns to live and connect and function within the world, but their consciousness is very much beyond. And so now the interesting thing that is being mentioned by Sukadeva Goswami is that whether you're in column 1, 2, or 3, devotional service is the means. Devotional service is prescribed. For the first two, devotional service is a means of purification. And for those in the third column, devotional service is an expression of their perfection. But either way, everyone should perform devotional service. Devotional service is for everyone at every stage. And whatever situation one is in, devotional service is what will elevate them and satisfy the heart. And that is such a beautiful point, that devotional service is relevant to everyone at all times, in all situations. That is such a powerful concept. But now, today, what I want to focus on is something very specific within this verse. Because today we're talking about, yes, we want a change of heart. We're talking, yes, that devotional service is the means to trigger that change of heart, whatever situation one may be in. But in this verse, what is being mentioned is Divrena Bhakti Yogena. And this word Divra is a very amazing word. And there could be many ways to define what Tivra means in the English language. Here are some explanations. Tivra means intense, dense, severe. When Prabhupada talks about Brahma's penances at the beginning, when he heard the word tapa, and he entered into a life of penance, many years of penance and austerity, he says this was Tivra Tapasya. It was severe austerity. Divra can mean serious, and Divra can mean forceful, with a great power behind it. So what is being said in this verse is not just that one should engage in bhakti yoga, but one should engage in Divrena bhakti yoga, or intense devotional service. And so this is very, very significant, because naturally the question is then coming to mind, what is Divrena bhakti yogena? What is intense devotional service? And when we look at our life, if we see that we've been practicing devotional service, but the change of heart is not happening, or is happening much slower than we would expect, then when we come back to this verse, we can understand that maybe the reason is that our devotional service is not Divrena bhakti yogena. It's not intense devotional service. And so what I would like to do today, with all of your help, and I'll ask for your comments as well, is for us to better understand what is intense devotional service. What does it look like? Let us spend some time to try to unpack, uncover, and unearth what is actually intense devotional service. Because as we enter a new year, and naturally there are new aspirations and new resolutions, perhaps the biggest resolution we can make is the resolution to intensify our devotional service. But then we have to know, how do I do that? What is the means? So here is a question, and I know Gora Hare Prabhu told me that many of you are on computers, and I invite you to write your comments in the chat, which will add to our discussion. If you have any comments on this or any thoughts, that what may be the difference between casual devotional service and intense devotional service. This is a very useful kind of question to ask yourself. Sometimes when we want to define one thing, then what we can do is look at that, the antonym, the opposite word, the opposing word. And sometimes the opposite word is more familiar to us. And by defining the opposite word, we can then look at the word in question and better understand what that may be. And so I invite all of you, if you have any thoughts and you feel okay and comfortable to put your thoughts on the chat, it would be interesting to ask all of you, what is actually the difference between casual devotional service and intense devotional service? And what I will do, I will give you some time to kind of crystallize your thoughts and maybe share with all of us. But let me maybe share a few things that immediately came to my mind last night when I was thinking of this. And I suggest this is an exercise that everyone could do. One kind of very practical way in which we may be able to identify casual devotional service is devotional service where we fit in or multitask our spiritual practices or our spiritual sadhana. Whereas intense devotional service would be a type of life in which we prioritize and give soul focus to what we're doing. Some of you are messaging me directly, so I'm just putting it out to everyone so everyone can see. So this could be one. Thank you. All your comments are coming in. So thank you very much. Gora Hari Prabhu is adding to this. He's saying, or someone from Galokadam is adding to this. They're saying, casual devotional service is where one is not fully comprehending the depth of or the power or the potential of the activity that they're doing. Whereas in intense devotional service, one is very aware, my God, the Bhagavatam is powerful. The holy name is powerful. I'm just adding, when you send your comments, please do send to everyone so everyone can see. I'm just copying some of your comments back to everyone so you can all see. So very nice. Thank you, Gauri and Golokadam Vasis. Yogesh says that intense devotional service is where the Supreme Lord is attracted to the jiva. Yes, whereas a casual devotional service is where the Lord is fulfilling the desires of the jiva. Yes, give me a house by the sea, a color TV. Jaya Jagadisha Hare. Yes. Prema Gopi Mataji says, intense devotional service is where we're doing it with the body, mind, and heart, whereas casual devotional service, we do it just with the body. Yes, it's external. Thank you. Your comments are coming in. Let me share with you a few more of the things I thought may allow us to identify casual devotional service. In casual devotional service, we have no serious plans to increase. We have no desire to increase. Whereas in intense devotional service, there is always evolution, there is always growth, there is always a feeling of doing more. Even if one is not able within the heart, there's a desire. These are very clear signs by which one can understand, am I in casual devotional service or intense? In casual devotional service, one may look for excuses or justification to neglect. Whereas in intense devotional service, one is actively seeking to eliminate those excuses and justifications so that they can't neglect. This is very subtle. It's very amazing that sometimes we are looking for justification of why our spirituality is substandard. Whereas when we're intensely practicing spiritual life, we don't want to justify, we don't want to be a victim, we want to dive in, and therefore we're looking to take all the excuses away. I'm going to go to some more of your comments. Another comment has come in that the difference between superficial and deep is the commitment level. Yes, thank you. Casual is just an activity. Intense devotional service is with emotion, with effort, with taste. Thank you very much. Casual devotional service means being in the comfort zone and doing service. So yes, casual is in the comfort zone. Intense is coming out of the comfort zone. Very good. Here I share with you one of the other reflections I had last night, that casual devotional service is devotional service in which we have no quality remembrance of the goal. In other words, like Krishna says to Arjuna in the 8th chapter of the Gita, Tasmat sarveshu kaleshu ma manusmara yudhyacha. Therefore, at all times, ma manusmara, remember me, yudhyacha, and at the same time fight. In other words, there is remembrance going on in someone who is intensely practicing. In other words, there is a connection with Krishna at the time of performing one's various services or practices of sadhana. I'm sharing this today as a very practical list, which will help us to understand where are we. Many beautiful messages are coming on the chat, and I suggest it would be good to write many of these things down, and at a later point, reflect upon our spiritual life on each one of these points, and maybe give yourself a number and ask yourself, how much do I fit on the left-hand side and the right-hand side? In casual devotional service, the mind frequently wanders, and we happily let it travel. That second point is very important, because Krishna says to Arjuna in the Gita, Yato yato nischalati manaschanchalamasthiram. Krishna doesn't say to Arjuna, if your mind wanders, bring it back. Krishna says, when your mind wanders. So the mind wandering in itself is not necessarily striking you out. But the question is, do you let the mind wander? And how much of an endeavor and how much of an effort do you make to continue Atmanyeva Vasamnayet, to bring the mind back under the control? One devotee said, I remember once in a class, he said, someone said, when does the battle with the mind stop? And the devotee said, the battle with the mind never stops, but at a certain point, you begin to relish the fight. In other words, there's an enthusiastic and active kind of interaction with the mind where we continuously bring it back, which becomes somewhat relishable because we're always bringing the mind back to Krishna. In casual devotional service, the primary motivation is fulfillment of my desires. Yes, I'm practicing spiritual life, but devotional service, sadhana and service is primarily a vehicle through which to fulfill my desires, whereas the primary motivation becomes Krishna and the Vaishnavas. So there are many other things which have been shared on the chat. And I think many of us have resonated on many of these points as to what is the difference between casual and intense devotional service. And so as a reflection for all of us today, Krishna is saying, Divrena Bhakti Yogena, that one must make that shift from casual to intense. They say, Tribhuvanath Prabhu used to say that, if I'm not mistaken, quoting Srila Prabhupada, that casual means casualty. In other words, prolonged casual devotional service may render one a casualty. And so sometimes it's not about doing new things, extraordinary things in spiritual life, but it's really bringing a certain quality and intensity to our devotional practices. So this is something, you can use this technique in the future. If you're trying to define one thing, then and you're not sure about what that could be because it's almost an unknown to you, then look at the antonym, the opposing or the opposite word, which may be more familiar to you, and define that, and then that will give you a very clear understanding of what the other thing may be. I will share a few more reflections on intensity. And then I am going to also open up for a discussion and any comments which anyone may want to share, and any questions that may be there. When we look at intense devotional service, when I look at the Bhagavatam, I looked at the Bhagavatam and thought, how was the intensity of the devotees in the Bhagavatam exhibited? And these were some of the conclusions that I came to. One way the intensity of the devotion of the Bhagavats was exhibited was through the quantity of devotional service. Like, for example, in the 6th canto of the Bhagavatam, you find how relentless Narad Muni is in his quantity of devotional service. Daksha has his sons, the Haryashvas, 10,000 sons who are his best prospects for populating the universe. And Narad Muni preaches to all of them and turns his 10,000 sons into renunciates. Daksha is aghast, but somehow or other he gets his wits together again, and he has another 1,000 sons known as the Savalashvas. Narad Muni is not content with 10,000 renunciates, so then he goes for another 1,000 renunciates, and he gives them a very powerful speech on renunciation, and they also become turned in their determination by his potency. Then Daksha becomes so annoyed and angry and frustrated that he curses Narad that he won't be able to stay in one place. And what does Narad do? He takes that curse to then go on and expand his service by traveling to place and place and preaching to more and more people. It's almost as though Narad always has this kind of constant vision that enough is never enough, always expanding, always enlarging his devotional service. So one way in which we may want to increase our devotional service is through the quantity of service that we do. That's a very kind of defined, very practical way in which we can increase our intensity. Another way may be through quality. When we turn to the 10th canto of the Bhagavatam, then we see an amazing quality, for example, in the Brijabasis, in their devotion to Krishna. It's very intense in quality. For example, you have Mother Yashoda who, takes the milk from the best cows, the most fragrant, thick, creamy milk from the foremost of the cows within Nanda Maharaj's herd. And then with her own hands, she churns that milk, thinking of Krishna, singing of Krishna. And then she prepares it very, very lovingly. And then she presents it to Krishna. Like there is such devotion at every step of the offering. There is such care and attention and incredible heart that goes into every step of that offering. And so another way to increase one's intensity is through the quality with which one renders their devotional service. There may come times in our spiritual life where we say, I don't have more time. So how do I increase the intensity? I can't physically do anything more. Then we increase the quality. For example, one year it was coming to a Kartik Vrata and I was thinking, I don't know what extra I can do. I don't have any more time to do anything extra. I would love to chant more rounds, but I can't. I just don't have that scope. So then instead, I made a vow to chant all my rounds in one sitting with eyes closed, sitting down. And it didn't take any extra time, but it was just an attempt to increase the intensity of my sadhana by increasing the quality. And so one can think about that also. When we look at the devotees of the Bhagavatam, then we see that they can also increase the intensity of their devotional service by increasing the difficulty, by taking on more and more difficult ways in which to serve Krishna, ways which require more sacrifice. For example, in the 8th canto of the Bhagavatam, we find the churning of the milk ocean, and we find the poison which comes out. And then we see that Lord Shiva steps forward to take the very difficult task of consuming that poison, which will otherwise destroy everyone and everything. And he is glorified in that passage in a beautiful verse. Tapyante lokatapena sadavo prayaso jana paramaradhanam dadhi purushasya khilat manaha. Tapyante lokatapena sadavo prayaso jana. What is the characteristics of the sadhavas, the great devotees? If you want to know who is a great devotee, tapyante, they take on difficulty, lokatapena, to relieve the difficulties of others. This is like a basic definition of an advanced devotee. You can know who is an advanced devotee, tapyante lokatapena, by how much difficulty, austerity, sacrifice they voluntarily take on in order to relieve the difficulties of others. Paramaradhanam dadhi, there is no higher way to worship the Lord, Purushasya kilatmana, than this. So another way to increase, if you say, I can't increase the quantity, I can't increase the quality, one can definitely increase the difficulty, the level of tapo divyam, the transcendental austerity that one takes on in their spiritual life. Another way to increase intensity is through responsibility. That we can begin to increase the intensity of our devotional life by not just caring for our own devotional life, but by taking on responsibility for other people's devotional journey. In the 5th canto of the Bhagavatam, we find the story of Priyavrata, who is very happy. Uttanapad had taken the throne and Priyavrata was very happy. He was in the forest and he was happily absorbed. And then he was told that we need you to take the responsibility of becoming the king and leaving this very peaceful and beautiful life of seclusion that you have and taking on the responsibility, the complexity, the anxiety of managing a kingdom. And it took some convincing, but finally Priyavrata took that on as a means to increase the intensity of his devotional service by taking on responsibility. These things are somewhat external manifestations of increasing one's intensity. But today I'd like to end with a final message, which is the final line of Srila Prabhupada's purport on this verse. Let me just go back to that purport because I'd like to show you that. Okay, here. The final line of Prabhupada's purport, and it would be interesting to hear the devotees' reflection on this because it's a very interesting line, but I think it's very telling. Prabhupada says, as the unmixed sun rays are very forceful and are therefore called tivra, similarly, unmixed bhakti yoga of hearing, chanting, etc., may be performed by one and all, regardless of inner motive. I think this is a very telling part of the purport, but I just want to share one thing with you, which triggered my thoughts on this. Underpinning the external increasing of intensity in a devotee's life must be an increasing intensity of greed, spiritual greed that is, enthusiasm, hunger, and attraction. In other words, when our increasing intensity in what we do externally is simultaneously accompanied by an increasing intensity in the very foundation of the internal life of a devotee, then that kind of divrena bhakti yogena will lead to the change of heart. There is a danger that sometimes if we only focus on increasing the intensity externally without simultaneously increasing the intensity internally, that external increase of intensity may not progressively move one's devotional service in the right direction. In fact, it can also sometimes have harmful effects. Because sometimes one may increase their intensity externally, and if it's not founded upon this very spiritual greed internally, that increasing intensity externally may be based upon material factors, which can be dangerous. So therefore, Srila Prabhupada very interestingly in the last part of the purport talks specifically about direct angas of bhakti in terms of intense devotional service. That one should engage in direct angas of bhakti, specifically hearing and chanting, because that is what will increase the internal intensity within the life of a devotee. And when that internal intensity increases and is then translated into the external world through increased quantity, quality, difficulty, and responsibility, then that combination of internal and external intensity increasing is what will ultimately trigger a change of heart. If we're internally increasing in intensity, but we don't translate that into an external increase of intensity, we may find that that enthusiasm, for example, is lost. And if we increase our intensity externally, but it's not founded upon substantial internal increase of intensity, then we will find that that level of external intensity is neither sustainable nor actually purifies our heart in the way we expect it to. And so this is something that I was reflecting upon today or yesterday when I was looking at this verse as to what does it actually mean to increase the intensity. And so I guess there are many other things I could say on this, but I think it's an interesting topic which could bring about some discussion. So as I prepare to open up, if any of you have any questions, you can share that on the chat or with Guru Hare Prabhu. I will just do a very quick summary of the journey that I tried to take you on today. We began by talking about the Bhagavatam and specifically the second canto of the Bhagavatam, which is really outlining the means of sadhana, the means of perfection. Within the second canto, the first 3 chapters really establish pure devotional service as the means to awaken a change of heart. Within those 3 chapters, the third chapter of the second canto, entitled Pure Devotional Service, the Change of Heart, within that chapter, we find this very beautiful verse where Krishna talks about wherever one is on, wherever one may be situated in the horizon of desires, whether completely material or completely spiritual, one should engage in devotional service in order to trigger the change of heart. But then we picked up specifically on what kind of devotional service. And we talked about Tivrena Bhakti Yogena, or Tivra Bhakti, which is intense devotional service. And then we did a little exercise where we tried to compare casual to intense devotional service. And then I tried to conclude here by talking about the external dimension of increasing our intensity and the internal dimension of increasing intensity, and how when intensity is increasing on both aspects, one without the other may not work, will not work. They have to increase together in tandem, synergistically. That kind of Tivra Bhakti will really begin to bring one many jewels in their spiritual journey. And so I will stop here and invite corrections, comments, and questions. And there are many exalted Vaishnavas on the call, so we can ask them also to share. Thank you so much. Hare Krishna.
Thank you so much, Sutapa Prabhu, for this brilliant and relevant presentation. We will first ask for His Holiness Sachinandana Swami to come on the call and to eventually give a comment on it or a question. Maharaj, are you here? Yeah.
Hare Krishna. Haribol Sutapa Prabhu. Nice to see you. And thank you for your wonderful presentation. Also, everyone on the call. It's nice to be in this exalted assembly. There, I very much appreciated your inverted hierarchy, where we could see that the Bhagavatam really values devotion and bhakti over all other considerations of ashram, of gender, of age, of varna, etc. It was very, very nicely presented, and also thought your discussion on Tivrena Bhakti Yogina was very good. As a comment, because you were inviting for discussions, there are, as we know, various ways in which you can perform bhakti, and of the three, or various types of bhakti. This is better. There is this Svarup, what is it called? Svarup Shakti Bhakti, I believe, where you have, you don't dedicate an activity to Krishna, like managing and performing bhakti in such a way, but you are engaging directly in activities like hearing and chanting, which inherently within themselves have this amazing power that unfolds. I have seen in my life and in studying the philosophy that sometimes if we just use our talents in Krishna's service, there may be mixture of different motivations and there may be different stumbling blocks there. But if you just can focus on hearing and chanting, then not on your own steam, not on your own intensity, not on your own efforts, or the power of your own efforts, you make advancement. But it's almost like entering a train where you're moved on the power of the train engine, the steam, and so on. I think this is a very nice consideration, a very encouraging situation, thing. I have recently just focused in my preaching to devotees and saying, just be there when you do these things, the direct devotional activities, and you will experience the transformative Shakti which comes through these processes, as opposed of moving on your own steam, because so it may be limited. I just wanted to bring this, throw this in. I don't think this comment is something which adds something to what you have said, because you were also focusing on no matter what is your motivation, the unmixed rays of hearing and chanting are there. That final line in Prabhupada's purpose, then yes, everything will be done. Because I'm called. See, it's difficult. I'm noting down, and then Guru Hari says, "Now, Sachinanda Swami." So I'm just throwing something out which is there in the heart. I hope it fits. And thank you. I felt very, as always, very enlivened. I can say I'm a great fan of Sutapa Prabhu. My pen proves my words. I make notes. Hare Krishna.
Thank you so much, Maharaj. Just to reflect upon your beautiful comment, as you were speaking, something came to my mind in terms of this kind of concept of focusing on hearing and chanting, which are very direct. As Prabhupada says, the unmixed rays of hearing and chanting, which are very direct. And I was reading Vrajakishore Prabhu's Madhurya Kadambini. He had written something, and he said something very beautiful, and with your permission, I'll share that on the chat. And I'll also read it out, but for those who want to follow on the chat, I thought this was a very beautiful reflection on Nam Sankirtan. And he said, now think about what it means to chant Hare Krishna, especially chanting japa in private. You have to stop doing all sorts of other things. You have to halt all your fixations on all other desires and feelings and just sit still for a while without diversion. All of this just to celebrate the name of the person you love. This is a deed that no one notices, no one pays you for. It has no fringe benefits. It is without ulterior motive. Celebrating the beloved name of Krishna is pure devotional service in the most practical, immediate, and tangibly accessible form. And when I read that, I thought that was very profound, especially the last line, that japa is pure devotional service in the most practical, immediate, and tangibly accessible form, because it's a deed that no one notices, no one pays you for, and it has no fringe benefits. And of course, we understand that we could still be doing japa and our mind, but in a sense, at least externally, it brings us into the closest opportunity of pure devotional service, because as many external things that could block that purity of flow are taken away. So I just thought that as an extra reflection. Maharaj, I don't know if you want to reflect back on that.
I think there are others. I saw Krishna Chaitra Maharaj raised his hands. Thank you.
Yes, please, Krishna Kshetra Swami, we are happy to hear from your comment.
Hare Krishna. My humble pranams to all, to one and all, and yeah, my appreciation for your wonderful presentation, Sutapa Prabhu. Something in my heart gets especially stimulated by systematic presentations. But of course, with such wonderful content. Yeah, a few things struck me in particular, but I think I'll limit myself to just appreciating your mention of Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur's explanation of the word akama. When you explained this, I almost felt like Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur, he has such an amazing devotional sense of humor. How he drew the direction of akama is to Krishna, because the letter A is Krishna, as he explains amongst Aksharanam. He is the letter A. I just really enjoyed that. That's just a detail, but coming to the substance, I do have a question, or maybe I know this is actually addressed already, not explicitly by Satchidananda Swami's comments, but in this distinction between internal and external intensification of devotional service, perhaps you could say something about, since you put quality within the category of external intensifications, we want to increase quality of devotional service, perhaps also as our increase of internal intensification. And I guess, maybe the response is obvious. Therefore, as Prabhupada says, chant and hear in unmixed bhakti yoga. But perhaps you could say something on this. Is it quality where we can maybe make a bridge between the external and the internal?
Yes, thank you, Maharaj. Yeah, when I saw, it's funny you should mention that, because even when I was kind of doodling on the slide and I put external and I saw quality there, even it kind of triggered it in my mind that have I put that in the right place? I guess the reason I had put quality externally is that I think we can also pay more attention to the detail of how we're doing a service, and in that way increase the quality without necessarily it being necessarily heartfelt. Like we just pay more attention to, so increasing intensity and quantity is doing more, and increasing intensity and quality is not doing more, but doing more attentively with greater consideration of the detail with which we do it. And then I think there's a quality which is much more internal, an increasing of quality, in which, we're really bringing our heart and our emotion and our real devotion into it. And so I guess although I gave the example of Mother Yashoda in that while discussing quality, I think for us, maybe increasing quality is just increasing the quality of attentiveness with which we do something. And and then hoping that as we increase that quality of attentiveness, that it will also bring about an internal change, as will hopefully the other things, as we do more quantity, as we do more. So yeah, I'm not sure if I'm addressing directly what you have to say, but my thinking of quality is that there's an external kind of increasing of quality and a deeper increasing of quality. And of course, they kind of hopefully feed each other.
Thank you. Yes, very nice points. Thank you.
Thank you, Maharaj, for joining us and for your comment. I think we have a little more time. We could take, I have one or two questions here. Also, if someone here in Golokadam has a question, give me a sign. Now we have one, maybe we stay more or less in the same topic of intensity, internal and external. Here the question is from Manju, and he asked, can you share for a young devotee what practical way we can have to go from the external intensity into the internal intensity?
Yeah, this is a very important point. And I mean, Manju here specifically talks about a young devotee, and naturally, in an immature stage of spiritual life, we're generally measuring an increase of intensity based on an increase of external intensity. And so that's generally where we put the emphasis, because that's what the world sees, that's what we see, that's what we're acknowledged and appreciated for. And therefore, we put the emphasis there, and that helps us to make us feel that we're advancing. That's not necessarily a bad thing that we're increasing externally. It's natural. And we see that Srila Prabhupada, we see that Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, they encouraged that, to increase the external intensity of what someone was doing, even when the motives weren't entirely good, because they knew that increasing external intensity would trigger about a change. So I would say it's not so much about a devotee going from external intensity to internal intensity, but what I would say it's more about building upon the external intensity by tempering it with greater internal intensity and allowing both intensities to rise. In other words, I think one of the points I was trying to make is that both things have to go side by side. And how do we go from external intensity to internal intensity? I think it's really a question of investment. And many of the things I talked about in that table, it means giving priority time to your spiritual practices. It means investing more time in your spiritual practices and your internal life. It means becoming more aware of your internal dialogue and internal state through things like journaling and introspection, by which you can actually begin to map what is going on inside and how are we evolving in our internal journey in Krishna consciousness. So I think it's about, if we want to increase internal intensity, it's really about spending time, quality time, and having the association of persons and devotees who nourish that aspect of our devotional life, and helping to put the focus back there through their association and inspiration. And of course, Srila Prabhupada's books are always a way to increase that internal intensity, because we see Srila Prabhupada is helping us to, through his purports, to really uncover the heart of devotion that we're trying to embody. So yeah, I would say it's not about going from one to the other, but it's about supporting one with more of the other. And how do we increase that internal intensity? By an investment of time, by good association, and by investment in Srila Prabhupada, investment of time with Shastra and, the Bhagavatam specifically. So those are some thoughts on that.
Thank you very much. And I think we can take a last question for today. The question is as follows. Chaitanya Bhagavat, Antya Kanda 4.121, Lord Chaitanya speaks. In this age, the demons and the Yavanas who have no faith in me will also cry while chanting my name. So the question is, does this statement pertains to all demons and Yavanas of Kali Yuga, and how? If there is no faith, demon and Yavana can cry because of chanting. If you can kindly comment on this one.
Yes, these statements we find in Shastra are sometimes puzzling. Of course, we do have this concept that the devotees, the dham, for example, are like overflowing receptacles of bhava. It's said that the dham, the Vaishnavas, they are like containers of bhava. And because they're overflowing with bhav or with transcendental emotion, it's almost as though anyone who comes within their vicinity, even if they are unqualified, even if they don't have the necessary, adhikar to experience many things, just by dint of being in close contact, the overflowing receptacle of bhav then spills over onto them, and they get a glimpse of what they are otherwise unqualified for. And so we see this kind of playing out in Mahaprabhu's pastimes and with the holy name of the Lord. So I think we can see it like that, that it is an overflow of ecstasy, that those who somehow by some great fortune come in the vicinity of, that they also begin to experience things that they're otherwise unqualified for. And I'll just say one other interesting thing. The word asura or a demon is an interesting word. And in one definition is given in the Sanskrit dictionary of asura. And the definition of asura is ashushu ramate iti ashura. So this is how asura is defined. Ashushu ramate iti asura. Ashushu means the senses in this context. Ramate means to play. Iti asura. And so this definition of asura is that anyone who plays or who delights or who engages in the enjoyment of the senses, such a person is considered an asura. And therefore, asuras are not just the one-eyed demons with ghastly faces who throw thunderbolts and cause all kind of chaos in the creation. The asuras are also maybe amongst more closer to home, let's say, anyone, ashushu ramate iti asura, anyone who's playing in the senses is also considered to a greater or lesser extent also demoniac. But everyone is getting the opportunity by the holy name of the Lord, by that great opportunity to be in contact with Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, to experience emotions. So yeah, these are some reflections on that.
Thank you so much, Sutapa Prabhu. So I think we have come to the end of today's session. We are very grateful for this beautiful lecture. I think there was a lot of content and a lot of important points that we might need to contemplate a little bit more or take it to the next level of application in our life. For those of you who want to see again the video of this morning lecture is also on our Facebook page. You can see again the diagrams and maybe take notes and see how you can apply for that. I think this Tivra Bhakti and implementation is a great key for our next step in spiritual life. So we are very, very grateful, Sutapa Prabhu. Now we will end this morning session by having a darshan of Darshan of Mohan. Usually the real meaning of darshan is that the deities are seeing us, but online